according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Hallelujah Ginger Tea drink and Hallelujah Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Hallelujah Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Hallelujah from all shops around.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Women Crush Wednesday starts off right here. Good Morning Uganda. It is the 9th of October, November 2022. Good morning, Uganda. My name is Philomena Mastiko. I must say that there are interesting times ahead here in Uganda because, well, there is quite a lot happening right from Parliament down to our districts. Now, it's day 2 of the PLE examinations. Pupils all over the country are expected to be sitting for their second pair of papers and, well, how yesterday went, it was pretty much well. Of course, a few reports of people who were caught attempting, to involve themselves in examination malpractice. I mean, this is something we anticipated, but every other day we get disappointed. Why is this happening? Well, I don't know how day 2 is going to go, but I want to think that it's going to go well. Now, down to Parliament, I can actually say that most Ugandans right now are not exactly happy with the Tororo Woman Member of Parliament, that is Honorable Sarah Opendi, after she did a request for a leave from the House, and she was granted, by the way, the leave from House to go and introduce the Alcohol Control Bill 2022. Basically, what this one is aimed at is to make sure that it provides a comprehensive piece of legislature when it comes to alcohol consumption and anybody and everybody involved in the business transactions when it comes to alcohol. And one thing I picked that was quite interesting, she did say, we cannot control Ugandans, especially when it comes to consuming alcohol, but we can regulate the hours in which they can consume alcohol. Honestly, I think this makes a lot of sense because I've come across people who are drunk from morning to another morning, Monday to another Monday, January to another December. I know Felix would have a lot to say about this because every other day he's always complaining. He has come across people, he has a certain term for them, but I don't know. I should let him be the one to talk about these people. Good morning, Felix. You must be happy about this bill.
Good morning, Philo. How are you?
Great, great. How are you doing?
Well, of course, happy is probably the word, but you see, that's the purpose of leadership. And I normally take an imagery of a home. If you let everyone do whatever they want, whenever they want and how they want, clearly, between you and me, you know that you're gonna head for trouble. So it's right for people to drink alcohol, and there's no one stopping them. Yes. But we must put some regulation. One of the biggest challenges lately to these guys is that, as His Excellency said, they're a danger to themselves, for starters. But also, after that, they become a danger to every other person. You see, anything that is addictive is dangerous. Because just like the Uganda saying that, I don't know if Mollen knows how to complete that. I would bet a very high amount if she can.
Yeah, and I'm very sure I would lose that bet.
Anyway, Uganda it's a like too much of anything is always bad. So this particular bill will do so much to save families. If you know how many families are struggling with children who do drugs, alcohol. Man, alcohol is that, I don't know. It's one thing that, and I thank God.
Yes.
I really thank God because I grew up around a home that people used to do a lot of
alcohol.
But I thank God that it's something I didn't pick as a good habit for myself. I really thank God.
Well, there are very many propositions that were under this, and maybe as we go on, we'll be breaking them down. Mollen, good morning. How are you doing?
Yes, a very good morning to you, Philomena. I'm doing all right, and I want to say good morning to your family. Well, we talk about all these bills coming from Parliament, but for me, I'm excited about this particular one because let's face the facts. There is need to regulate alcohol consumption in Uganda. Just recently, a lot of people died in West Nile due to some kind of liquor. We don't know whether it was, it got into the market. So people were aware of this. But because they are not, there is no regulation whatsoever, we lost people. And also to top on what Felix is saying, families are getting into issues because of alcohol consumption, not to mention the fathers specifically. And I had the speaker yesterday also emphasizing on emphasizing on the fact that it is a fact that when men take alcohol, they cannot take care of their families. And we have absentee fathers now. It is no wonder we are seeing a lot of sad cases. Like recently we had a student commit suicide. Again, we have another suicide case. And according to the reports, he asked for a set, a mathematical set to go do an exam for PLE. And once the mother could not provide, he called the father who is absent, who has abandoned his family. He called the father and he's like, I cannot do that. And giving that information to the mother is also like, go, I cannot provide, your father is not around. And you lose a child because of that. Neglect of family right now, every issue that is connected to that, it should be of concern. And me, I applaud Parliament for even wanting to do that. And I do hope the Honourable comes back with a very clear bill to regulate that. But also, I look at the situation with police also caught my interest, withdrawing or taking down some of the police stations. Now, some of the residents are actually complaining, saying, well, we know that there has been a threat and, of course, attacks to police stations where, sadly, we've lost police officers. But if policemen are withdrawing from this, how are we supposed to ensure that we are safe? Because now they are also... and I had one policeman last night saying, so they're also scared and they're running for their lives. But, in a bid, according to police, they are trying to reorganize and, concentrate on more focused operations. We understand that. But in the meantime, we're also scared. What do we do in the absence of these police stations? But I'm sure that it's for the common good. And also, Philomena, I want to tell you that regards to international event in terms of climate change, that is the UN summit in Egypt, so far Uganda has scooped 2 awards. And that is all in regard to sustainability. That is very good news. And among the African countries that have been recognized for specifically mobility in terms of going renewable, for our motor vehicles that are electric buses, electric motorcycles, we have been recognized, and for that we did get an award which was received by Honorable Minister Chibet on behalf of the President. That is for leading such a mobility campaign. That is good. We have also signed an MOU between the European Union and Uganda at that in terms of forest program. That will ensure that we are utilizing our forests, but at the same time, we are giving it the sustainability that it needs so that we do not lose to the environment, but at the same time, we're able to utilize such resources. That was a very powerful one. It also puts us in a position where the EU is now going to be funding projects related to environmental programs, especially with forests, and that is coming across from COP. We do expect that by the end of the 14 days, we'll have more that Uganda is actually getting to be highlighted on.
Well, I guess congratulations are in order for Uganda as a country, but also as we are speaking, the intern doctors are still very persistent on the strike. They're saying that they're not going to pick up the tools until their salary disparities are worked upon. Again, this was another issue that was before the plenary yesterday up for discussion. Of course, we did have quite a number of members or parliamentarians coming to say that, well, this issue issue had been sorted, but they did not have evidence to show for it, saying that the interns had already gotten their payment. But as of now, the interns are not ready to get back into those hospitals and do what they're expected to be doing. I don't know, Robert, what do you think about this? Good morning.
Good morning to you, team, and of course our lovely viewers. Thank you so much for waking up with us. Really appreciate that. Well, the issue of intern doctors, it was dealt with, and at least by yesterday we were told that money had been sent to their respective hospital accounts to be managed in a proper manner. We hope that happens. But also,
we hope it's true.
We hope it's true. But also parents, well, pre-primary, primary, they're expected to be home by the 25th of this month, contrary to the earlier plan, which had been breaking off on the 9th of December. So parents plan accordingly. In just a few weeks, the children are going to be back home. And this means, well, either you shorten your working schedule or something to have them. We don't want to go back to what we had during COVID-19. So the time has been cut short because of Ebola. That is also something, there's so much contention about that. Yeah. Which is safer, you know, when they are home than when they are in school. But of course, they are more congested at school compared to what we believe there are at home. But for me, I believe the best, let's work it out. And on the alcohol thing, FedEx brought out a Uganda saying, I grew up when they had told us a story of Siroganga. I don't know if Felix remembers that, but at least he grew up with grandies, and these were common things. This man met the king somewhere. The king had a horrible disease and he had gone for treatment. So he told him that keep this a secret. Now, when there was a party and this man was drunk, he began mentioning Sebo Kabaka. The king said, Siroganga was killed because of booze. He lost it. NRM Bush War Heroes will tell you stories of a man called Zabulon. Zabulon and his friends during the Bush War went and drank booze. After drinking booze, they killed people. Now, by then, it was General Jim Muhwezi was the lawyer of that during the Bush War. So they were paraded and he said, but these people were drunk. So the commander then said, if they were drunk, and it is booze that made them kill people, now let's shoot at that booze. Let's kill the booze. And that was a very good precedent for Bush War heroes. They will tell you the Zabulon story. And never did they go and drink and then say they have made mistakes because of alcohol. So alcohol is a big devil. Yeah. And I hope they regulate it. But the problem, certain things are hard to regulate with our Uganda, and you have very good laws, but implementation. If people could drink throughout COVID-19, do you remember that? Yeah, but some would even lock themselves inside and drink thorough. So yes, you would see a person drunk coming out of some place very drunk. Now regulating time may be a problem, more so in a time where Uganda day by day is becoming the hub of happening within the East African region. People are boarding buses. On Friday, they start to come and enjoy the nightlife in Kampala from Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, to come here. And
well, Honorable Sarah Pendi said they can drink after work.
Who said?
I think the issue is not even about the actual drinking.
Yes.
See, when you're regulating, it's not that you're going to put out of place. You are finding ways to keep it sensible. Yeah. And I think that's what she's trying to say. That if we, and like what Phila was saying, if you're talking about places, like most recent, you've seen KCCA crack down on a couple of places because of sound pollution and all these things. So that's the same thing, that if there are time frames, this whole thing of saying Uganda has become a hub of whatever, what is it, happiness and what?
I would borrow your words, Felix, yesterday. They would definitely have to be squeezed to make sure that the regulation
within what the
is
law
put
is.
into place.
But honestly and truly, this thing of alcohol, trust me, parents need it more. We parents, let me even not exclude myself, we need it more than any other person.
Yes.
Sometimes you've seen what happens in schools, Philo?
Yes. Oh, yes.
In schools.
People sneaking alcohol.
Oh, my God. You send a child in S1 and they are very innocent, they're good kids, altar boy, what? At the end of S4, the kid is coming back speaking about alcohol like they've been learning brewing and what? You know? So it's I think it's a longer-awaited solution we must get for all of ourselves and the country.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of stories happening here in Uganda across, well, when it comes to Kenya, I will tell you that the pilots are still over there on their industrial action. I don't know, things are really getting tougher, and very many losses have been incurred by several industries and sectors because they cannot have their products leaving the country or being exported to their destinations. Well, that and much more we're going to be giving you updates, but for now we'll be getting into some of our local stories.
And we will begin with the HIV/AIDS prevalence in our country, where government has directed that both public and private institutions mainstream HIV-related interventions in their workplace. This was revealed by the Prime Minister Robert Nabanja during the annual HIV/AIDS symposium spearheaded by the Uganda AIDS Commission. The annual HIV/AIDS review for 2021-2022 shown that adolescent girls and young women still bear the burden of HIV infections compared to their male counterparts. According to Uganda AIDS Commission, the national HIV prevalence rate stands at 5.2% for women. The prevalence is at 6.6%, and in men it is 3.8%. The review also shows that 54,000 new HIV infections were registered last year, and majority are women. Financing for HIV also comes high on the agenda, where stakeholders want government to operationalize HIV Trust Fund. The U.S. Ambassador to Uganda, Natalie Brown, pledged U.S. support to HIV fight in Uganda, although stigma and discrimination remain a challenge. The number of people living with HIV still stands at 1.4 million.
And the Ministry of Education and Sports has announced that this year's third term of pre-primary and secondary level will end on the 25th of November. State Minister for Primary Education, Joyce Muriku Kaduchu, told journalists at the Media Center in Kampala that it was a cabinet decision to decongest schools that are likely to increase vulnerability of children to Ebola virus disease. Children are at a high risk of contracting Ebola disease since they require daily contact from peers and caregivers. World Health Organization statistics show that children who contract Ebola virus are at high risk of dying from the virus than adults.
And moving on, today PLE, that is the primary living examinations, enter day 2 and the final day. They commenced yesterday with mathematics and social studies. At about 832,810 candidates started writing their paper. Nakasero Primary School in Kampala registered 200 pupils who all turned up. Examinations at the center started in time, and the school has held UNEB for keeping time. Pupils had mixed reactions after the first paper of mathematics, though many said it was fair and they did answer the questions accordingly.
Now, the medical interns under their leadership have declined to end their industrial action until the government clears their demands and requirements. Now, they revealed this during a meeting with Parliamentary Committee on Health regarding their strike over delayed payments for over 2 months. Now, the medical interns also discussed about the salary discrepancies across the board, among other issues.
Elsewhere, Kyiv's main recondition for entering negotiations with Russia on ending the war is the return of all captured Ukrainian land, according to a high-ranking security official. Oleksiy Danilov, the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, said on Tuesday that the Ukrainian side also needed the guarantee of modern air defenses, aircraft, tanks, and long-range missiles. Kyiv has repeatedly called for additional arms from its Western backers following Russia's invasion in late February. And a cartoon by a French newspaper depicting Qatari footballers as terrorists has sparked outrage on social media, with users calling out its blatant Islamophobia and racism. The caricature was published by Le Carnet and Chaney in its October issue, which focuses on Qatar and its role as the FIFA World Cup 2022 host. The image depicts 7 bearded men with Qatar written across their chests above big numbers. They appear to be chasing a football in the sand while carrying machetes, guns and rocket launchers. One wears a belt laden with explosives. 5 are wearing blue robes and 2 are wearing black shirts and pants with balaclavas covering their faces. 5 men in white robes are drawn on the sidelines looking on.
Hundreds of striking pilots at Kenya Airways have been ordered by court to resume work by Wednesday, while the airline was barred from penalizing the pilots. Judge Anna Mwaule of the Employment and Labor Relations Court in Nairobi said in Tuesday's order that pilots should resume their duties unconditionally by 6 a.m. Members of Kenya Airline Pilots Association, a union that represents about 400 pilots at the carrier, went on strike on Saturday after failing to resolve a dispute over their pension contribution and settlement of deferred pay. And climate news, the global population is about to reach 8 billion, and by 2050, 1 billion people may be refugees because of the climate crisis. The population figure is likely to be hit on Tuesday during the COP27 summit. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the milestone puts into perspective what the climate conference is all about. How will we answer when a baby 8 billion is old enough to ask, what did we do for our world and for our planet when you had the chance? This UN climate conference is a reminder that the answer is on our hand and the clock is ticking. The UN estimates the world's population may grow to 8.5 billion in 2030 and 9.7 billion in 2050 and peak at 10.4 billion in 2080s.
Well, crossing over to our health updates this morning, obviously every other time we encourage you to make sure that your health is in check, because what is life without good health? And what do you do, or what do you use, or what strategy do you take to ensure that that is achieved 100%? Well, Robert, what gospel are you preaching this morning?
Well, I decided to preach the same gospel over and over again. You know, Christ was here so many years, not so? But we still go to church. We still read the same Bible.
Okay.
From Genesis and whatever verse you choose. Now, when it comes to your health, I cannot get tired of reminding you that your number one priority in case of drinks must be products from Hallelujah Reflexology. This is Hallelujah Turmeric Drink, Hallelujah Ginger Tea, and Hallelujah Banana Fruit Juice. What these do is they boost your immune system. I can tell you, you want to be healthy, you want to be very productive, use Hallelujah drinks at just 1,500. Any of these bottles, these award-winning drinks as the best for consumers. I guarantee you, once you take this, you'll have a good addiction, because they are not harmless at all. Neither are they alcoholic.
Well, clearly, Honorable Sarah Pendi would be in total agreement with you on that one. So Wednesday and Good Morning Uganda, we're going in for one of our songs from one of our most phenomenal women you've ever come across. When we get back, Good Morning Uganda Newsreel will be up in here and we'll be having more discussions to have with you, and we would really love for you to be part of them. We'll be sharing with you much later on about what you can talk to about when it comes to that very special segment. We'll be back shortly after this break.
Hallelujah Ginger Tea drink and Hallelujah Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body, because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Hallelujah Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Hallelujah from all shops around.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Women crush Wednesday starts off right here. Good morning, Uganda. It is the 9th of October, November 2022. Good morning, Uganda. My name is Philomena Mastiko. I must say that there are interesting times ahead here in Uganda because, well, there is quite a lot happening right from Parliament down to our districts. Now, it's day 2 of the PLE examinations. Pupils all over the country are expected to be sitting for their second papers, and well, how yesterday went, it was pretty much well. Of course, a few reports of people who were caught attempting, to involve themselves in examination malpractice. I mean, this is something we anticipated, but every other day we get disappointed. Why is this happening? Well, I don't know how day 2 is going to go, but I want to think that it's going to go well. Now, down to Parliament, I can actually say that most Ugandans right now are not exactly happy with the Toro woman member of Parliament, that is Honorable Sarah Opendi, after she did a request for a leave from the House, and she was granted, by the way, the leave from House to go and introduce the Alcohol Control Bill 2022. Basically, what this one is aimed at is to make sure that it provides a comprehensive piece of legislature when it comes to alcohol consumption and anybody and everybody involved in the business transactions when it comes to alcohol. And one thing I picked that was quite interesting, she did say, we cannot control Ugandans, especially when it comes to consuming alcohol, but we can regulate the hours in which they can consume alcohol. Honestly, I think this makes a lot of sense because I've come across people who are drunk from morning to another morning, Monday to another Monday, January to another December. I know Felix would have a lot to say about this because every other day he's always complaining. He has come across people, he has a certain term for them, but I don't know. I should let him be the one to talk about these people. Good morning, Felix. You must be happy about this bill.
Good morning, Philo. How are you?
Great, great. How are you doing?
Well, of course, happy is probably the word, but you see, that's the purpose of leadership. And I normally take an imagery of a home. If you let everyone do whatever they want, whenever they want and how they want, clearly, between you and me, you know that you're gonna head for trouble. So it's right for people to drink alcohol, and there's no one stopping them. Yes. But we must put some regulation. One of the biggest challenges lately to these guys is that, as His Excellency said, they're a danger to themselves, for starters. But also, after that, they become a danger to every other person. You see, anything that is addictive is dangerous. Because just like the Uganda saying that, I don't know if Mollen.
In the headlines.
So what are we federating? Whether rats from another country can be, somebody must be there to hold everybody accountable.
Every Wednesday at 10 p.m.
First of all, we as elites of Uganda, we have made Museveni the issue. I can tell Museveni is not the problem of Uganda. The problems of Uganda are much deeper. We can change the next 20 presidents and we'll still be this roundabout.
Was brought to you by.
Simply make a small deposit of 99k and pay the balance mpola. You can pay in daily, weekly or even monthly installments while you enjoy your new phone. So what are you doing today? Visit any MTN shop near you and get the MTN cupboard super easy.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Good morning, Ugandan Israel. Welcome to this special segment of discussion where we talk about what's happening in your communities. Now, on this 9th day of November 2022, myself, Philomena, Mastiko, Felix Nkunda, and Robert Kirabo, Nyonyintono here. We're going to be talking about something that has been almost being talked about by all communities, especially around here, Kampala, for the last couple of days. And this is in concernment with the closure of several police posts and also in regards to the security of people. Now, Kampala residents and people in all these other areas where some of these police posts have been closed are living in fear because they believe that after these police posts have been closed and shifted to more sub-counties, the issue of security is coming into play. They're wondering what's going to happen to us, what's the way forward. Now, in the last couple of days, we did receive that about 129 police posts had been closed. And of course, there is also coming in from a different perspective, there is also a saying that maybe they're going to be merged. And this is not sitting well with Ugandans. We have quite a section or a faction of Ugandans who think that maybe this is the right thing to do. Maybe it was high time this happened. And then there is also another faction of Ugandans that are asking and questioning the efficacy of some of these police posts. Were they doing anything productive? Maybe it was also high time that happened. But also there is a third group of Ugandans that's wondering what's the way forward? What's going to happen to the people in these areas where some of these police posts have previously been posted, and now that they are being taken to sub-counties, to different sub-counties, what is going to happen? Well, again, we can't answer those questions, but we can try to find a way around them. Now, maybe just to hear from you, Robert, we start with the efficacy of police. When it comes to several communities, there are different responsibilities that are supposed to be played by all these police posts that are placed here. Number one is security, but again, we have seen on several occasions this security being compromised, and we have people questioning, are these guys even being helpful at all? I don't know. What's your take on that?
First, I've learned in this life that if you want to see problems, be everywhere yet nowhere. You end up being a busy bee. You know? The moment Uganda police wanted to be everywhere but nowhere, that was the first blunder. Much as people today are saying these police posts have been very helpful, I want to tell you, many of them have been a danger to the people. Because it is very bad to assume that there is security, yet there is nothing. You think you have a security guard if you have a mansion, meaning you have a home, a big home.
Yes.
So you go to these private security companies. You can even sleep forgetting to close your window because you have an armed guard sleeping outside. Kumbe, this is a drunko who enters his room at the gate and sleeps completely. People come rob you, even use the gun of the askari to rob you. So many of these police posts have been there but non-existent. I know one where I passed when a dog has given birth inside a police booth. You know? And the mother was trying, how did the dog enter if they were there? Then you use that. And now you're having problems with puppies. I want to tell you, if you ask Fred Enanga, two things that police has battled with. One, even this has not started today. This move that Ugandans are seeing today began way back in 2019.
Yes.
And I know that Fred Enanga knows, and people who have interested themselves. The merger, because they said, fine, we began so many police posts. Coordination is a problem. Some of these have been den of thieves, not police officers, den of thieves, where these police officers, because they have been so thin, that's why I said you don't have to be everywhere yet nowhere. Us who have taken time to study crime and are very passionate, have been covering all this, you find that when you have a police post and you deploy 2 police officers with the 2 guns, what's the magnitude of these police officers in terms of pacifying and carrying out security? That is why many people will tell you that what these police officers are turned into is finding all ways of extortion. All ways of extortion. Because they knew they are thin. That is why when they saw the rampant attacking and stealing of guns from them, they had to reawaken that process. Philo, when 5 men come and they know they are going to target 2 police officers, one is the other side, and they were very vulnerable. But even because they were so thin on ground, they never had a major impact in fighting crime. What they were doing may be through intelligence-led information, if they had received it, but they would be in communities, and most of the problems were that these police officers, if they had arrested, they were supposed to take to the mother station. Now, one time, I went to some police station. It is in Bunamwaya.
Yes.
It's just a booth around. They arrested this girl. She slept there, and there's no police officer. Now, supposing someone at night came and touched this. You've locked her with a padlock. The police officers have gone. She's also scared. So, what these police officers normally were doing was, around 8, 9, they move in the community.
Yes.
Around 10, they could cover a few boys, young men walking. They bring them at police posts that they are vetting them. Extort, take away. And mother stations have always been having problems with them, telling them, how do you detain people here? You're not supposed to detain people here. You're supposed to arrest and hand over to us.
Yes.
But there's been a lot of criminality happening at these police stations. They arrest, they solve issues, then at the end of the day they extort, they let go. So even police managing and ensuring there is professionalism at these police posts has been very hard for them.
Yes.
So these have been a danger to communities, not security to communities, and what they had begun doing were even settling issues that are not criminal cases.
Yes.
I want my money from NASA, because they were so thin and they were so incorporated within the community. And if you're dealing with issues of security, it is not just a matter of saying you have a person with a gun. You have the entire UBC premise, and you say, you know, UBC. They will steal and steal and keep on stealing. Because security, you must look at ability. According to the international standards, one police officer is supposed to police 500 people. That is the ratio.
Yes.
Now, when you look at most of these police posts, their deployment were 3. You have OC station, then one CID, then a regular one. Now, these 3 to police about 2,000 people. And worst of all, they were not facilitated. They were not facilitated. They neither have motorcycles. You know, it was just disaster for them. And I would pity them in most cases. That is why they will tell you, to akubida police, tewaliyaze, you want them to come running. So, when police now looks at their vulnerability and trying to be everywhere and lack of effectiveness, when police says, let's merge these people, have a big force at one police, where we can coordinate effectively and say, you know what? This is what has happened. At Muzei Chiseka's place, just these kilometers away, we've received a phone call that there is an house breaking. You have about 4 officers at once. You have motorcycles, because where the merger is, there are fairly some facilities. Then these are able to go and respond. Rather than calling, you're calling police officers who are simply going to be very honest and tell you, we don't have movement 2. We are only 2. How can we then be able to respond at such an incident? So for me, I thank police for waking up and realizing that it is very dangerous to be everywhere, yet nowhere, but also sympathizing for the lives of these officers. Because much as criminals may be in society, this wave of attacking police officers and taking their guns was very clear. It is not about attacking civilians because they don't have guns. These are people who need weaponry. And when you talk about weaponry in the NRM government field, a government that has a story of 27 guns, where there are guns, they never play. If you come, they know how few guns can be a disaster. So when they hear that now there's a deliberate move to target these vulnerable police officers and take weaponry from them. The best is to ensure that you close these police posts, bring merger where they are safe, but where also resources have been brought together that you can have meaningful action.
Yes.
Rather than saying you have a police post there, yet the police officers are few, they are useless, they are just now benefiting from you in the community through extortion and look for other ways of survival.
Well, still speaking of the closure, the very first one did happen in Lubaga, and we did see quite a number of police posts closed, but also in other areas like Luwero, Itiana, we've already witnessed some of these police posts closing. But now, according to the spokesperson for Uganda Police, that is Fred Enanga, he did say that when it comes to security and efficiency, this sub-county policing is going to ensure that there is effective policing model. And in his own words, he actually said that the model is premised on the need to enhance police visibility, automation of policing services through advanced technology, consolidation of the available resources and assets in the sub-country. And he also added that all this would be very effective in both rural and urban areas. Now, Felix, when you look at some of these elements, the key elements he talked about, and I'm picking police visibility, the automation of policing services through advanced technology and consolidation of the available resources, looking at what we have currently, I mean, if you compare, how far are we from that, or is this something that we're going to be achieving anytime now, especially now that they've started this sub-county policing?
Well, it's when you talk about this particular story, I think it's also important for us to, even Philo, before we go to that particular question, it's key for us to understand why there was this suggestion that I think came in when it was the time of General Kayihura to try and bring police closer to community. It was still to answer the wake of crime that had increased then. The abductions, if you remember, there were enormous killings of girls in Entebbe, around that side. It was a good idea, or it is a good idea, as a matter of fact, to have police closer to people in communities. You may not hate the game, you may have to hate the player. And in this particular case, that's quite critical for us to appreciate. Police may press a panic button and try to pull out these people from community, and the results are quite evident even up to now. In one of the stories you did say that it has caused fear in communities. It means there has been a contribution. Whether small or big, that's another discussion. I know for a fact that security is not about sometimes the magnanimity or it's not about how able. Sometimes it's a psychological thing. That's why when you go on police or in any checkpoints, you may not see people with heavy guns or swords or what. But psychologically, the fact that you know that there's a checkpoint, that is already in its own self a security measure put in place. So the existence of police posts in those particular communities or localities, you can't say it has been not productive. I think it is something that has been so much useful. The other discussions of the challenges could come along the way. Now, the other attribution to this, or that causes quite a fragile sentiment in our minds, is that the core purpose of policing is to prevent, to detect, and to avert crime. And in all those components, and even others, not limited to those, you find that communities have to have a relationship with policing. So, when you talk about these whole aspects of withdrawing and what, and how police is treating this particular incident or previous incidents, and how they're responding to this particular incident, says a lot about the kind of police we have in a country. I've had people ask, if police is running, what should they do? Should we, yes, probably we should be flying us. We should be finding ways of flying. Yeah? Because Every other person, whatever happens in the community, the first thing you say, njakutwala kuki.
Police.
So if there is no police, as I've told you, security is psychological. People will not do some things. You see, when you talk about crime, we are focusing on this terrorism, but there's also other bits of purposes of police, which they are doing well in community. There are these petty, we have family matters, we have civil issues. Police is doing well on these ones. Land, just to mention but a few. So we have carried the whole abstract of police and only focused on the big crimes, the criminal gangs and what. But I think the presence of police must be revised. And this is why we have had discussions, and I think most recently also Parliament has interested itself to discuss its budget. Police has been consistent about its lack of manpower. Consistent. There's never a time where we said the police has been well staffed. Why? Because of its budget. It has a limit. I know that Ugandans don't want to enter police, by the way. But police can't recruit a particular number of officers because it doesn't have the ability probably to pay them, to maintain them, to train them, and all these things.
So could we say that Ugandans shun away from all these conditions? There is nobody who would want to work under these conditions. If I'm given a better option.
And actually, that's not even the fear. But police, because it has a standard that if we are to enroll people into the forces, we must have ABCD in place as a requirement. Police officers, when you look at, there are so many things. There's stationery. You've gone to positions I've told you to buy forms. These things happen every day.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you need a kumirwa form. Why? And it's not because it's their problem. Because the forms are actually not the capacity. The institution has no capacity to do that. Now, how do you tell someone who they have brought for you to take a statement and arrest to buy a form on which you're going to, you understand?
To put a statement. So the institution has failed itself, or the government has failed?
No, it's the conditions. It's not even any of these people. But that's the truth of the reality that we face being a third world country. Okay? So we must, and this is where we must also, I think, in a particular way, work with police. That's why I think in the wisdom of police and its leadership, probably also leadership of His Excellency, they put in place a community liaison, probably directorate or something. And I think with our very good friend Fande Muleterwa is acting in that capacity. That because of this understaffing, because of this incapacity of police, how do we use communities? How do we engage communities? And this is the best way of policing for a force like this. But what is the force doing by far? And that's why, if you remember earlier, when we did this story at its outbreak, we talked about what is the relationship of police with communities. Trust me, police can survive in communities if it has a good relationship. But when it is looked at as an enemy, these are the results. In terms of people witnessing, information, or even support. But what do police officers do? Some police officers, they go in communities, they marry everyone there, they are giving birth there, they are buying land, they are brokers there. You go to a police post and it is an office of brokers.
Different businesses are being
that's the challenge. And this is not an
That's
institutional problem.
That these, when people are not facilitated very well.
And I want to disagree with Bob on that.
Let me tell you, Felix, I want to be very honest with you. You talked about challenges of police. You see, some of these problems, we don't want to face them head on. We want to act like an ostrich that puts its head in the sand and leaves the entire behind exposed. So if you are to handle these things, you must be very open. That you're opening up a police post. You get it? You're hiring one room, there is a toilet, you're telling them, and the back, then the next they find out where they're going to sleep. These people are coming into communities, They don't have even the simple facilities that they need to use, apart from an AK-47. So, by nature of their work, you're putting them in a situation where professionalism is going to be compromised. They're very few. They don't have the resources, yet their work is very tempting as well. That's why you're going to find that most of these police, because it is, if you understand situations, if you visited these police officers, discussed with them.
What is tempting about police work,
Talked
Robert?
with them and looked at what is the welfare they are going through.
Okay.
And the nature of their work. You find that some of these things...
The nature of their work we all know. That's why
you're going to find they have to go and arrest someone. They don't have transport. You get it? They don't. You've not facilitated them. You know, when we don't speak these realities... You
call them and then they ask you to
because you're going to tell them to come and arrest someone who has offended you, and you expect them to walk miles and walk miles back. Then someone will tell you, "Oh, now transport."
Let me say this. Let me say this.
Yes, Felix.
You see, police, and do not talk about police in isolation of the general condition of Uganda. Let's not act like police is acting in a special situation, yet Ugandans are also. These are the same conditions Philomena you live in, he lives in, I live in, and so many other Ugandans. That's why I'm saying that when you talk about tempting, everyone is tempted, Philo. You sit on TV every day, how many people approach you to put through? This is where we live. But we have a standard requirement for us to execute our obligations as professionals. Everyone is tempted. It's the same thing when you go to doctors. You've seen how many doctors ask for 20,000.
Now, when you bring the nature of police work and the doctors, I agree with you. Now beginning to talk about something that is...
I think there are basic things that go with any profession. You may not achieve what you want 100%, but there are basic conditionings that I mean should work. For example, if you're going to post me to the sub-county and you're only giving me an AK-47, what happens to the rest of the other? You mean I won't need any other... I may not get what I need to execute my responsibilities 100%, but I think what Robert is talking about, you could provide about 50%. So maybe if I need a patrol car, it has to come with fuel. If we need stationery, you can't just give me a gun.
You're interacting with people who have urgent
You may not
needs
exactly give me 100%.
You may not associate that to a person who is working on TV. These are people who are coming to you, they have urgent needs, they want to be addressed. Same like the medical profession that is talked about, you know. So some of these things, if we don't face them and say that no matter what you're doing, let's improve the welfare of police officers. Let's give them what they need to do their work. However much you talk about professionalism, however much you talk about ethics and integrity, by nature of these works we are talking about, they are, you know, their risks or the grounds are so fertile for this. That is why I told you that these police posts, much as Felix has said, that to a certain extent they could, you know, police visibility is also deterrent sometimes. But if we've reached an extent where people are attacking police stations, that means they have gauged and they have known.
They know their
that it's not all about visibility. You get it? But these people don't have enough manpower. The communities will assume to in a police post to Kuma. These people are there, but they cannot help. They're not protecting you in any way. Because they are so thin. They're not going to risk their lives. That's why we have things we call police. What guns do they have? Because who is going to put themselves in harm's way? You know, you're overpowered. So at the end of the day, it is better you have them merged in one central point, facilitate what needs to be put there, because you have a number of manpower. You can react meaningfully than thinking you have people there, yet they are not working.
Now, briefly, because now we have gauged that some of these deficiencies coming from government, then the institution of police itself. Now, how do we cover some of these loopholes? Because ideally, if we are talking about the police itself having issues in an institution itself, meaning that it is failing itself, how do we cover that gap? And also, how does government come in? Yeah. First,
when Enanga was speaking about this, he said they are going to use technology. One of the things that can help if government is very interested is technology. Many countries that are detecting are making investigations because of technology. that when a crime happens and they come at a crime scene, they just pick fingerprints. They go in a database and they make a match, and soon they know this is Felix Nkunda. If you have the cameras, we've seen cameras help detect, help arrest. Technology is one of the ways that we can use in a modern day. 2, ensure that you have equipment that is needed. You know, things like transport in this era, things like manpower should no longer be a problem at such a time. Let's prioritize. What do you need as police? Let's give them what they need to do. And I just believe that that will go a long way, because you may not have to scatter them everywhere, but they can be at one place if well facilitated. And Ugandans should know that they're not removing police posts anyhow. Much of these police posts, the one they are removing to, because they had also become a bit many. You go to Rubaga, there is a police post where at this corner, up there. So if they have been around 5 here, let's remove 2. 129 out of the 1,062 police posts that we've been having of this is not yet so much of removal. So I don't see why we should still have the need for panic. And some that are being closed is because the mother station is not very far from them.
Okay. And Felix, briefly from the government side, what do they have to do?
Well, I think majorly from government, the expectation is that we need to refocus on how we train our officers, how we recruit our officers, but also how to maintain them professionally. Most of them come in as good officers, but in a couple of years you've seen what happens. Our police has challenges of us professionalism. That's a matter of fact. No wonder you have approaches like corruption, quite common rhetoric in their practices. So I think government must focus on refresher trainings for these guys. You see officers who entered the forces 30 years ago have never gone for any refresher course. They are big, they are about to burst, they have a belly as big as a
That's why we saw the president of Tanzania deciding to make sure that
the man looks like he's competing with Zakayo. And so what can he do? He's at a police post, he can hardly move. All he does is eating. Now, we need to help these officers of ours, refresher trainings continuously. You see, now crime has changed. How are they helping them learn the new sophistication of crimes, you know, new weaponry, these things, new all these things. So we need to help them do refresher courses, but also probably for Parliament, it must really look into the budget allocation for police. It's important. Our police officers look like they're the worst people in this country. You meet them, look at their shoes, poor women and men, look at their uniforms. Sometimes they don't eat. It's sad. Now, and they're supposed to support us and protect us. So let's look into their welfare. It's key.
Very, very key. How does the closure of police posts affect management of crime in communities? Get into our socials and let us what you think about this. #UBCGMU. Good morning.
That's right. The Voice is coming to a city near you. From the 21st of October to the 10th of November, you get a chance to showcase your talent. Prepare a 1-minute MP4 video of yourself singing and upload it to thevoice.africa to register. Make sure you have a valid Airtel number, and if you're shortlisted, you will be contacted to come in for the live auditions.
Well, don't just stand there, let's go!
Music your passion, Africa your stage. The Voice Africa, connected by Airtel.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way, because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Hallelujah Jingati drink and Hallelujah Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body, because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Hallelujah Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Hallelujah from all shops around.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, in the press review this morning, starting off with the Daily Monitor, Ebola kills 8 children. Well, we are still onto that, and right now we know that it's in Kampala. And looking at the rising infections and death, including among pupils, forces government to order schools to close 2 weeks earlier than the December 9th date amidst new cases reported in 2 more districts. And the government school with 5 pupils and 12 teachers, they're giving you quite a story on that one. And in more stories, activists back Museveni on GMOs, and government seeks 100 billion Uganda shillings for satellites, and audit flags defects at airports, and Uganda supplies new HIV drugs. And again, looking at security arresting about 10 relatives of Naduli. Well, you can get more detailed stories in the Daily Monitor this morning. And looking at the second page, audit flags defects at Entebbe Airport, and M23 rebellion about ESC leaders pushing for dialogue.
Crossover, crossing over onto the New Vision, Macquarie launches fare for transit. That is detailed on page 2. Why schools will close 2 weeks earlier. The teachers and parents speak out on the closure. That is a story on page 3. Student arrested with 27 bullets. That is a story on page 11 in the New Vision. But also more, they're giving you a big picture right there as the Prime Minister and the US Ambassador Natalie Brown during the AIDS symposium at MOBS yesterday. Now, where also 2 teachers jailed over forgery. That is a story on page 31. And HIV infection, 79% new cases among adolescent girls. That is a story on page 6. And in PLE, 47 pregnant pupils sit for national examination. That is on page 4 of the New Vision.
Crossing over to the Daily Monitor sports, burden of Brazil, and we're looking at the FA World Cup Qatar 2022. And looking at the days to go, we only have about 11, showing you the Brazil fixtures over there. And looking at the bottomless talent, Neymar ready to carry the weight of 5-time world champions. And still in more sports news, looking at CONMEBOL backs FIFA stance, politics must take back seats. And also in the world of tennis, looking at Francis Caroline Garcia claimed the biggest singles title of her career with victory over Arina Sabalenka.
And in the New Vision Sports, whose title is it? We're talking about the varsity games, of course, looking at the finals, the UPL finals on Saturday at Lugogo, and of course more on the specifics in the sports section. AUS moves on, looking at the Uganda University sports, and of course also the finances right there. But also a word from the AUS president, and more details on that in the New Vision Sport, but also your World Cup paper. Now, what you can expect as we look on the countdown, 11 days now until we get to the World Cup.
And in the Daily Nation, storm over, plot to end term limits. Well, the country has more pressing matters to deal with, leaders tell the MPs. And 75 years is the age at which Salah Yakub wants a person to be barred from running for president rather than the current constitutional limit of 2 terms. Well, the ruling Kenya Kwanza Alliance yesterday reacted angrily to revelations by the Fafi MP Salah Yakub of a plan to remove presidential term limits. Well, you can get the full detailed story of this story in the Daily Nation. Now, looking at 27 post-election crackdown returns to haunt Kome in vetting. And when we cross over to education, Machogo's big U-turn on university funding. SGR inside the commercial contract no one wants to touch. And senators give governors 14-day ultimatum over ghost workers. Again, another pending issue that they need to look into. My husband couldn't swim. Now, this is a lament coming in from a wife of the crash pilot. Still, you can catch up on many, many more stories in the Daily Nation. Well, that's it from our papers this morning. Make sure you grab yourself the Daily Monitor, the Daily Nation, and a copy of the New Vision to catch up on these and many more. But also, Mollen, when it comes to whether you were talking to us about the awards that we got here in Uganda. I don't know, you could elaborate more. I feel like at this very, very specific point, we need more reasons to celebrate.
Well, yes, indeed. I think we have really put in a very good drive when it comes to mobility. We were among the first 2 countries in Africa to actually produce electric vehicles. And of course, that is in addition to Nigeria, which was also looking at the same campaign. But actually, we were the first to get them on the road. We're talking about the initiative from Kirabo. You've seen the buses, very beautiful. And now we already have also Tondeka adding to that. Well, we were really doing great. And this award for me was really well earned, and we've worked for it. But also looking at sustainability when it comes to dealing with climate change. We have put on a very good fight regarding to the targets that we actually set out in Glasgow last year. So the Uganda delegation right there in COP27 right now should be happy about this development, because some of these targets we actually set them last year. So Philomena, I can tell you the bar that we set then, we are living up to it, and I think the Africa delegation at the COP were able to recognize that, which is why we got those awards.
Well, there you go. But I also do understand that you have quite a special guest for us this morning, who is going to be telling us more about what's happening over there in Egypt as COP27 is going on. Well, that's it from the these morning's papers, and of course, Mollen will be giving you quite a lot more about what is happening over there in Egypt, and the special guest will go for a short break. When we get back, more on that.
That's right. The Voice is coming to a city near you. From the 21st of October to the 10th of November, you get a chance to showcase your talent. Prepare a 1-minute MP4 video of yourself singing and upload it to thevoice.africa to register. Make sure you have a valid Airtel number, and if you're shortlisted, you will be contacted to come in for the live auditions.
Well, don't just stand there, let's go!
Music your passion, Africa your stage. The Voice Africa, connected by Airtel.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, we're still talking COP27, and of course we do know that a lot of organizations are also in Egypt at Sharm el-Sheikh, basically discussing a way forward on the climate action. Now, this morning we will be having a UNDP representative, the resident representative for Uganda, who will be joining us to talk to us about Africa's position at COP21, and specifically also looking at Uganda in terms of where we are at with the negotiations, but also when it comes to our nationally determined contributions. That is the discussion that we will be getting into this morning, but also reflecting on the fact that so far we have had a lot of wins. We've talked about the awards, but also the signing of the EU, that is between the EU and most of the African countries when it comes to the forest program. Now, Uganda is also one of those. We have put our signature on that, and we do expect that we will be having more when it comes to the forest conservation programs and sustainability for climate action. Also, our ministers are pulling in one direction with the immense sacrifice and commitments, looking at the fact that we could be making these commitments for our greater good. Now, the financial aspect as well. Now, we do have our negotiators who are pushing hard for loss and damage financing. That is the aspect that we'll also be talking to Miss Elsie, who will be joining us this morning, and also look at how more can we get more funding, especially now that we're looking at more vulnerability in terms of extreme weather events across Uganda. We have also seen increasing flooding, increasing landslides, also the drought crisis in Karamoja. That is still of concern, and of course those have all been related to climate change. How we move forward in terms of adaptation, that is also one area to look at, and our delegates are also making substantial inputs in the so many side events and the negotiations. Now, if you can picture COP27, it is a huge event, a huge summit where we do have also all these side events that are discussing matters of importance, especially with commitments, where the finances are coming from, commitments from developed countries, how they are helping these developing countries in terms of looking for adaptation strategies, but also fronting the agenda. Now, yesterday we also know that most of what came out in the UN high-level negotiations was looking at the roadmap that will be providing clear standards and criteria that must be followed when developing the net zero commitments. Now, this is aimed at cutting greenhouse emission, and of course also talking about greenwashing. Well, key recommendations built on credible initiatives as well. When we're talking about net zero, that means that we're looking at initiatives to cut emissions into the atmosphere. But this morning we want to welcome UNDP resident representative to Uganda, that is Miss Elsie, to talk to us about COP27. Well, Miss Elsie, a very warm welcome this morning. We want to thank you for joining us this morning. We want to know more about COP27. Talk to us about the key concerns, especially as we look at these negotiations. Where are we at, Uganda's position, but also coming in from UNDP?
Well, first of all, Mollen, thank you very much, and thank you to BC. I hope you can hear me very well, and great Samuel Sheikh. Sorry, I'm not so much in perfect conditions in terms of the setup, so I'm using my phone to have this conversation, but I guess that's what technology allows you to. First of all, also let me appreciate UBC for inviting me to be here, and indeed to the government of Uganda for extending an invitation for me to join the Ugandan delegation, and by extension, supporting the Africa position and the Africa work here, and also to UNDP, my principals. Now, first, let me just set some context, Mollen, and I know that I'm preaching to the converted, but for the audience who are listening to me this morning, let's set some context. I think we know that climate change perhaps presents one of the most compelling challenges of all times, particularly for African countries. We've seen the impacts of climate change. In our own country here, we've seen the impact of the climate with the floods in Mbale and other places. We have seen the impact in Karamoja. We have seen the impact in neighboring countries. See what the drought is doing to livestock, to people, to in Kenya and others. So again, I can go on and on because I want that to sort of segue into what Africa is expecting at this COP and why it matters for Africa. As you know, Africa has emitted less when it comes to global greenhouse gas emissions, about 3% on average. So what is the expectation here? And I think 4 things that I wanted to say very briefly, Mollen, and to the audience who are listening to me. First of all, it's this dubbed the African COP. And why is it dubbed the African COP? It's dubbed the African COP because not only is it on the in terms of being Egypt, but also taking things that African countries are putting together, including Uganda, and the negotiations and the conversations here, is that we need to move towards implementation. And so the tagline for this particular COP, together for implementation. Let's move away from the messages, let's move away from rhetoric into action. And so implementations are the heart of this thing predominantly. And the second thing that is that's also very concrete here and that has emerged where African countries are policing around is on adaptation. In other words, we are being impacted by climate change. We all need to focus on adaptation very strongly. And there's a whole conversation now around program towards the goal around adaptation. How can countries show that they are climate change, particularly African countries, and how can they be supported? And that leads to my third one in terms of expectation, the means of implementation. In other words, if we have to implement the Paris Agreement, if we have to implement issues around the convention as a whole, where the conference of parties are, we need to talk about financing. So there's a lot of push now on financing, particularly for countries like Uganda and developing countries in Africa in particular, to be able to respond to the impact of climate change in terms of adaptation. Now that means that was probably needs to be realized.
Yes. Elsie, just a moment. You are talking about financing, and that brings out a good point as well, because we look at the fact that, like you mentioned, most of the African countries are actually vulnerable to the fact that they have not been contributing much when it comes to climate change. But are there initiatives that are being provided, even within the roadmap of COP, from organizations like UNDP, to look at more of the adaptation? Because that is where we are at right now, the resilience and the adaptation. How is that like coming from organizations like UNDP and also some of those that we are looking at in terms of financial aspects?
Okay, so very briefly, if you're one, I think there are 2 things that I didn't touch on very briefly, and it's very important, Molly, that I talked about them. But that's a very important conversation that's around loss and damage, where African countries are also pushing for the conversation. We've been impacted by climate change. We are losing livestock. We are losing lives. We are losing infrastructure. We need to be compensated. This is picking up momentum here. And the final thing that I wanted to touch on very briefly is on just transition, just energy transition, where countries are saying, we need some time to transition. It needs to be just. Many countries have developed on the back of fossil fuels. And it's not to say Africa needs to do fossil fuel entirely, but to say that the transition needs to be just and that the technology for countries towards that needs to be able to be provided. Now, having said that, what are we doing to be able to support that? I think, first of all, and by extension, the UN in Uganda and the work that we are doing, we are focused on, first of all, helping to put together what is the ambition for Uganda and how can Uganda be supported. So the nationally determined contribution, which is what a country in terms of what it's able to provide to reduce emission, but what more is one of the things that we've been helping with. And the NDC of Uganda is very ambitious, where the target has moved from 22% to 24.7%. And that NDC provides initiatives where private sector, government, non-state actors and others can rally around. I think that's the first thing that we have been able to do. The second thing is also exploring different financing instruments and mechanisms, and that goes to your question. And there are 3 or 4 pathways that we are looking at. First of all, we are looking at a situation we can articulate what the government and Uganda can benefit from when it comes to Article 6 of the Convention. And that is with cooperative agreement, carbon trading, and we help to put together the framework that. The other one is also to look at mobilizing resources from the vertical funds. For example, the Global Environmental Facility. These are funds that have been made available. And as you know, one of our biggest programs on the wetlands project, which His Excellency the President has been championing, is one of those financing able to tap for Uganda. So that's another area that we have been looking at. The third thing is to look at private sector engagement. How do we support private sector to look at bankable programs, bankable projects, and initiatives, whether in the transport sector, energy sector, and to be able to then be able to put financing around. So private sector engagement has been one of the core areas that we have, but also by extension the UN family in Uganda. And I think finally, what is quite crucial is not only the finance only. In the case of Uganda, South-to-South cooperation becomes very important conversation. What is Ghana doing? What is Nigeria doing? What is Gabon doing that we can draw from? And by extension, what can they draw from? And South-to-South cooperation, strategic partnership in that space are things that we are working on. So we have a suite of projects and programs that we are supporting as UNDP. I can't name all of them.
Yeah. Well, sure. Very sure about that, Ms. Elsie. But we also, you brought up a good point about, the commitments being done right now and the negotiations are key, but also the point about the carbon markets. Now, we don't know that yesterday, from the outcomes actually at COP27, there was a decision about the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative that was inaugurated yesterday at COP27. Now, is this something that we can look at to benefit from? Because we're looking at more of the compensations also being involved with financing. How do you see the position here of Uganda for us to venture into this new carbon market initiative? Is it going to have to be private sector or government, involved? And how can an ordinary Ugandan be sure that this could be a step to take in the fight against climate change?
So let me first of all say that the carbon, there are so many initiatives. It's not the only one. I think the couple of initiatives that have been launched by different partners, different actors have launched a series of things. And of course, we are also not only the voluntary sort of market, but also the compliance market within the convention itself. Now, how can Uganda tap into these? And I think that is your question. It's quite important, Mollen, that we lay the conversation, we clarify a couple of things. Before you can trade, you need to make sure your regulations are clear. How are you going to trade? Who is going to trade? How would the benefit be sharing? What is the price of carbon that you're looking at? How do you determine that? There's a lot of things. And so everybody can benefit in the sense that you have to track the 190s. The private sector can get involved. The government needs to provide the conditions, which is the policy, the instruments, and in Uganda, that is provided for in the Climate Act in terms of the carbon. What we are helping the government with now, as I speak, is to say, how do you unpack that in the case of Uganda? What would the regulation look like? Do you have a register which says that if somebody else wants to do a project with community A, where is it registered? So that you know that accounting for everything. Also, how would the benefit be shared? You don't want a situation tell some communities to say, oh, we are going to give you money, give us your forest, and they don't give them anything. We've seen it happen because they call carbon cowboys and cowgirls. They're all over the place trying to get take advantage sometimes of the vulnerable people. So I think in some, the opportunities are there, and we see a number of them spring up. What the government needs to do, and we are helping them with, is the regulation and the instruments to guide that, to prepare the private sector itself to be able to trade, and to work with communities to understand what their rights are, what they need to do, and how to do for it. I think ultimately we have good examples of what is happening on carbon trading. All over now, we have countries where we have seen them be able to trade some of their carbon. But importantly, what we need to do is that we need to make sure that the conditions are right for Uganda to be able to benefit from it.
Well, thank you very much, Elsie. But we're looking at this new initiative also with the MOU that was signed yesterday with the EU and most of the African countries, Uganda included, in the forest program. Is that also going to include the initiatives that you're talking about, or the opportunities that Uganda could tap into when it comes to carbon trade? Because we're going to be utilizing these forests, but at the same time, we're looking at the sustainability. How attainable is that?
I think, first of all, to come back to the EU details, they can stick to it. I would say that it's only 3 countries. Actually, it's Uganda, it's Zambia, and Congo that are involved in this. I think 2 other countries are Guyana and Mongolia. And so it's, I think, a 40 million project to support Uganda. I'm not sure whether it's in the space of carbon trading, but I know it's in the space of forest.
Yes. Well, as we move to conclude, talk to us about some of your expectations on the outcomes of COP27. Just you're also looking at the roadmap for the UN, but key expectations that everyone can look forward to after COP27.
Well, I think my expectations are pretty much aligned. Expectation, our regional director, one is here as well in UNDP to rally support for Africa. I think what is important now is the issue around financing, because it's very important. Our countries are being impacted by climate change. You've seen them, and that is couple that with the impacts of COVID, the war in Ukraine, fuel prices, and everything going up here and there. It's quite important we deal with it here and now. And I think we can't procrastinate anymore. It has to be scaling up. We also want to be able to expect that we would, as a top tagline is together for implementation. Indeed, we would move towards implementation. It's been years of promise. It's been years of waiting. And we need to make sure that we move from rhetoric to action. So I think from us, is that we'll be able to support Uganda here itself, to be visible to the world, and to be able to leverage some potential resources and partnerships to support our work here in Uganda as a government.
Well, thank you very much, Elsie. She is the resident representative of the UNDP in Uganda, and of course also at COP27. Now we'll be looking forward to more conversations, especially with regard to where we can tap in terms of potential and also look at key outcomes of the COP27. Now you also look at the fact that we have had our Ugandan delegation right there. We have negotiators, we have climate scientists. I say we're looking good when it comes to negotiations, but I think the key factor here is on financing. Are you also looking at some of the organizations that could be joining in from Uganda and at a UN level to help with the financing? Because that is where we want to look at. We have had more extreme weather events that will need compensation for people that are being moved, also for loss and damage. In your conclusive remark.
Well, I think it's a call for partnership across board, partnership with government, partnership with private sector, civil society, religious organizations. Financing is just one part, but the different aspects of it, there's technology transfer. There is issues around how we invest in our energy transition, how we position Uganda. So there's a lot more that I think that if we hold hands together, including with the media like you, in terms of your advocacy role, that becomes important. So final reflections is that, look, we are together on this matter, and we have to give it all our attention, the urgency it requires, position these issues around our policy, our planning, our financing framework, and everything that we do as partners in support of it.
Well, it was nice having you. Thank you so much. We do wish you a nice stay in Sharm el-Sheikh, and of course, good negotiations at COP27.
Thank you very much for having me. Sorry that I was not in a position to have a bigger screen, but I hope you still heard my voice right, and really greetings. Hopefully get in touch.
Well, gladly, and of course we'll be continuing with that conversation, but the key aspects that I have been able to pick up from this conversation is that there is need for more financing, but also we are making more progress with more initiatives that are being created at COP27. Of course, looking into the carbon trade right now. We do have the forest, and of course there is a lot that is involved with the science on how to credit that. The carbon tax is involved, but if we can tap into that potential, have more opportunities. Also, she did talk about involvement of private sector and government. That is something that we could also be looking at more, but also how do we support most of these initiatives that will be coming across, and that is where the key factor is. We'll be having more conversations from COP27, and of course with regard to where Uganda is at in terms of negotiations, but also our nationally determined contribution. Well, that is it for this morning's discussion, and of course we'll be tapping into more opportunities at COP27. My name is Mollen Kenyena. I want to wish you a good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
That's right. The Voice is coming to a city near you. From the 21st of October to the 10th of November, you get a chance to showcase your talent. Prepare a 1-minute MP4 video of yourself singing and upload it to thevoice.africa to register. Make sure you have a valid Airtel number, and if you're shortlisted, you will be contacted to come in for the live auditions.
Well, don't just stand there, let's go!
Music your passion, Africa your stage. The Voice Africa, connected by Airtel.
Every waking day is a reminder just how beautiful this, our land, truly is. The kind of beauty that you can only find here, in the lush green all around us and the wondrous sights within. It's in the distinct aroma of our cooking, to the taste of food that takes you on a journey, in the sound of homecoming and the sound of Mother Earth. In the magnificence we find on our travels and the exciting moments we experience. Ours is the kind of beauty that comes in all things big and small. All we have to do is awaken our senses and truly enjoy what's uniquely ours. Explore Uganda, the Pearl of Africa.
Pick of the day on UBC.
You can only become a leader when there are problems.
Behind the headlines.
So what are we federating?
Whether rats from another country can be, somebody must be there to hold everybody accountable.
Every Wednesday at 10 p.m.
First of all, we as elites of Uganda we have made Museveni the issue. I can tell Museveni is not the problem of Uganda. The problems of Uganda are much deeper. We can change the next 20 presidents and we'll still be this roundabout.
Was brought to you by.
Simply make a small deposit of 99k and pay the balance mpola. You can pay in daily, weekly or even monthly installments while you enjoy your new phone. So what are you doing today? Visit any MTN shop near you and get the MTN cupboard. That's super easy.
We bring you a fresh, well-researched program to help you identify opportunities for investment, job creation, growing your entrepreneurial skills, wealth creation, and social transformation.
We have a product that is ready for schools, supermarkets.
Create wealth, transform livelihoods. Every week, we showcase opportunities for creating new products and services.
I now harvest a lot of cocoa. When I harvest it, I sell. After selling, I put money in my project. I have 2 projects. 1 is for construction of my house, 2 is for educating my children.
Excellence in innovation, the passion and drive to succeed, and the right mindset to grow your business. Create wealth, transform livelihoods. Brought to you by Operation Wealth Creation.
That's right. The Voice is coming to a city near you. From the 21st of October to the 10th of November, you get a chance to showcase your talent. Prepare a 1-minute MP4 video of yourself singing and upload it to thevoice.africa to register. Make sure you have a valid Airtel number, and if you're shortlisted, you will be contacted to come in for the live auditions.
Well, don't just stand there, let's go!
Music your passion, Africa your stage. The Voice Africa, connected by Airtel.
Live from Now Avenue in UBC Studios. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Now, good morning once again, and thank you so much for staying with us on Good Morning Uganda. UBC. Now, today is Wednesday, and one of those days that people call the Women Crush Day. I don't know how true that is, but nevertheless, we do crush on those women who break their backs for us to survive in this beautiful country. Now, far from that, today we will be talking about something quite also beautiful that also forms a backbone of religion in this country, and that is we'll be having a discussion into the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of Gaba National Seminary. Now, there's no better way to discuss this than to draw from back, quite way back, how religion has evolved in this country, particularly when you talk about the Catholic Church, and that again will be understanding through my guests today. Now, in studio to discuss with me, that is Reverend Father Vincent Chigozi. Sebo, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.